Wait, hold on. I gotta take my meds. It's been about a minute. Let's check out our phone. Whew. So as I realize a bunch of different stuff, I understand that there is a, there are a lot of things at work sometimes that people don't understand, and it sounds like I'm talking about political stuff, it isn't, and they don't understand science and realize the consequences of their actions sometimes. And the realization of fact that people are very, very stupid sometimes. And they do things out of love sometimes, but they don't realize sometimes that it's just passion. That thought is created to preserve yourself, and it's an evolutionary trait to preserve life, and the realization that no one else knows the bonds, I guess, of what people have, and what people don't understand is there are a lot of those bonds that can break very easily, and they're fragile, extremely fragile. And not in the way of what's the word? Not in a way of physical distress or anything like that, but emotional damage. And I'm gonna sit up because I'm just trying to realize a fact. And so as people start to realize their inconsistencies and where they lack, or where their skill lacks, because their minds can push themselves to that place, and that place where they know a bunch of things, but they don't come back from that place. They can know a bunch of different information because of everything that they've remembered before, but their mind itself is lacking in a certain sense or capability of being able to understand the elements that surround them. The chemicals that are composite for, I'd say, what the word fuel is, because they're chemicals. It's the chemical that makes oil and a lot of different things. But there are a lot of stupid things that people do sometimes that don't understand and realize that that a safe distance away from an explosion is a very, very pertinent thing. Shit. A safe distance away from anything sometimes can be completely and utterly just... Oh man, just realize how much stuff you're using. Realize how much stuff you're using. Realize if it's too much. Realize if it's not enough. Or realize that if it's useful at all, then it's dangerous. The reason why I think that the reason why a lot of times the planet's getting warmer and things are starting to awaken that weren't there before, because of things they don't understand. When they don't understand things, they don't understand the fact that that things can get pretty hot pretty quickly sometimes, especially in some big places where there's nothing but wind and chemicals, basically, that are running around. Not running around, but flying around through the air. It's the reason why sometimes people treat dirt. They treat it with not a chemical, but a process that removes most of the hazardous material inside of it. Because dirt by itself is very fine. That's very true in a lot of places, and I was going over some of my thoughts and notes and stuff like that, and that realization of fact is it needs to be treated first. Every piece of that, every grain of sand or whatever they want to call it, powder dirt or whatever, they're going to realize that because of certain things, like I'd say guns flying everywhere, basically a vibration made. See, that's the reason why people don't understand. Even when an object is met upon by a force or a set force, that set force has a startup pattern. And that startup pattern is still a force. So now realizing that that force itself has a set pattern to be able to initiate, given kinetic energy, or maybe an even pattern of thought.
Bullshit!
As that a reaction happens, or as that thing happens at all, and this is the reason why I think people don't understand the characters that are portrayed in here. A lot of people didn't realize the things that they did whenever they were in California. They rode around in cars constantly, did a bunch of stuff, threw cigarettes on the ground, stuff like that. Sometimes poured gasoline someplace because they didn't need it, or left gasoline someplace, or maybe not started, but initiated the buildings of illegal dumping grounds. And that's in a case where sometimes they think, I guess, the fire actually happens, not because of any sort of residual spiritual energy or anything like that, but because of the fact as the groundwater breaks it down, there becomes a spot where that always sets on fire. So there could have been a person out there that believed and knew in what all these scientific things were. There could have been a person that covered up a shit ton of what they were doing and realized a certain fact, that they could control the economy with one fire. One fire set in two places. The same pattern, being able to make certain things, and yes, in a way, it was perceived and should be perceived as a class something, I don't know exactly the words for it, terrorist attack. Understandably so, it's probably a person who acted individually, because no ounce of terroristic plot or place, they don't know the science.
Miss me!
They don't know the science of certain areas. And that's the reason why they were able to contain it. So that's the reason why it happens when people study environments and that's also the reason why sometimes people keep the place and the realization of certain environments in. Granted, certain people get mad and they say things they don't mean, or do things that they don't want to do, understandably so, only because they didn't get the information. But if they had the information and someone pissed them off, if they were mentally unstable, then probably that's the reason why it happened. The reason why I think sometimes people don't understand about certain situations that they need to stop doing because they're stupid and they're dumb and they know they're dumb is because it takes a very specific amount of what people, yeah, this is a ballerina twist. That was awesome. It takes a specific situation of fact or a specific multitude of elements to be able to make those certain reactions. And it could have been something that someone had set very, very long ago. It could have been something that someone tried to manipulate a market to be able to get people to live there. And it could have been a lot of different correlations between different facts that made all those things happen. That's the reason why sometimes you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket, like living in a place that's completely near the water that hardly ever has any vegetation on its own. It's the reason why sometimes people didn't understand the things they were burning off in their engines sometimes. Because of the oil or crude oil sometimes in the processes in which they made it, it made basically air that could be set on fire. That's where what you see in what is it, Resident Evil, the chick Alice, and her ability to be able to set things on fire. It's what happens when there's dirt. The dirt that's fine happens. It's like this reason why all those hotels and stuff like that in Africa and northern parts of the Sahara Desert and stuff like that, they're all made of stone and salt. And if they're not just made out of stone, they're made out of they have a stone or a concrete base. It's the reason why they're made like that, because there are preferably things that constantly set on fire no matter what. Shit. That's the reason why there's a difference between when you set something on fire in California and you set something on fire in Israel, because of the dirt that should be treated with not a chemical but a process of not grinding but binding itself. A loose glue probably would help. But also realize that if that thing is treated in any way with any chemical, then you're putting chemicals inside of what you're eating. Yeah. They don't need horses or anything like that. They're gonna have to get because horses make glue sometimes, but they need to get a synthetic chemical that has no taste or smell to be able to be edible, because it's an edible chemical, and that's probably what they need to be able to make a lot of different stuff actually happen, like awesome trees and amazing different stuff, because I know them to be very, very good gardeners, because obviously Osama bin Laden learned something other than being a terrorist. There were a lot of times when I realized certain things. Once I realized those things, I had so many moments of eureka in my entire life when I was a young kid, and I usually kept it to myself. And my mom and dad got extremely, extremely angry with me, because there were some things that were different, I guess, back in the day. People were less flaunty with things, and people were less. They didn't want to show off everything they had sometimes. But in order for economies to thrive, sometimes people need to understand that they need to share information. And not like friends or be friends or anything like that. Even if they don't want to be friends, because usually they don't. but understandably so, a mutual respect with information giving, and realizing the fact that people kept all of those scrolls. All of those scrolls that kept, and they put them into books. And that's literally sometimes what is the thing that is, and also too, sometimes they like to play pranks, like stupid shit. That's the reason why they don't pay for books sometimes, because they don't get all the facts right. Also too, that could be a manipulation of text. It could be a typo, basically. And a typo as in someone who came in, decided to change the text, and then left. And then decided that that would stick with that. Because they don't understand that, that it's not true, so it's not happening. At least on this planet Earth that I reside on. Obviously, the Statue of Liberty was not made out of bronze. So, it was made out of copper. A lot of times I've realized that, there are certain people out there that understand a certain number of things. And they understand everything about our planet, but understandably so. If they understand anything about the planet, it's that it's an entire planet. And as they understand things as it is an entire planet, it's not one section. You can't just make it do something. That's the reason why it gets unstable. It's the reason why sometimes gravity stuff, like things that are stable in space, like nuclear reactions and stars exploding and never hurting anyone. Realization of fact that the star itself has a consciousness. It's the reason for the fusion reaction at all. It's not exactly a consciousness, but understandably so, it's there. And it knows that it's there. And it does calculations. Lots and lots of calculations. Unbelievable amount of calculations within its own head, within its own what it would call a cranium, or what it would say is a cranium, but it knows it can't have one. And that's the reason why there are a lot of different things that happen to people and with people that are able to change specific moments in time. Not moments of time, but moments in time. It's the reason why kids' minds go to sometimes their worst fears. And their worst fears are personified sometimes whenever they take chemicals or breathe in certain chemicals or something like that. There really could have been a chemical leak in a lot of those places that had shootings, because yeah, there really could have been, and because of kids that were disabled, probably all of them were disabled, and people don't understand that. It sounds like a conspiracy, but it's moreover something that happened because of someone's irresponsibility. You can go over as many drills as you want to. If you're not breathing in the right air, then you're not taking in the chemicals that you need. So realization of fact that realization of fact that if you're not breathing or taking in the chemicals that you need, the realization of fact that there are a lot of people out there that their skin tone gets kind of unmelanin, and that's what it affects the most. It usually affects the skin and only the skin. But if it's ever ingested, then it can affect something like pancreatitis or anything like that, and that's the reason why a lot of people know how to be able to get that stuff out, and because they've looked at dead bodies before and a lot of different other things, and they've known and shared information as much as they could, and as much as they mostly wanted to, because there was information in there, but that probably wasn't what they needed to know. I think that's the reason why I think people don't understand that it takes timing to be a stupid terrorist. That's the reason why I say that science itself is a measurement. Because it's a measurement, it's not reviewed among peers sometimes, and that thing never happens again. But in that place, that thing can be changed. Not exactly changed, but understandably so, it can be manipulated. Realizing that things around you can be manipulated, there is a chemical composite within ions and things that literally don't take anything from anyone, but understand that through that certain thing, through those certain specific situations, that science can manipulate one object's pH balance into another object's pH balance. Hence the reason why some people say that I have water in this cup and I can transfer it to this cup. All they do is don't realize that they have a hook or a tube on their arm and they're doing a trick, but they're using it with both of their hands. So that's the reason why they use it with a tube running from one cup to another cup. Or they realize that just filling up one cup with water would be easier, and then draining that cup with probably and I'm getting back to my point. So what's the word? A camel pack, I think. 2 camel packs, I guess, or whatever those because sometimes when water freezes, it creates a vacuum. Not only when water burns, it creates a vacuum, but it can create a suction. Because that's the reason why. When something is expanding, and something has, like, say for instance, something has a drain, the reason why it expands, or the reason why it tries to expand, is because it's taking in air. The air itself is freezing around it. That's the reason why you hit a water bottle and it freezes in a certain temperature. Because of the way that the water bottle is designed sometimes. When the water bottle is hit, when there's ever any sort of a rocking at all, the temperature itself is realized because of the ionic vibration that you're making with your own hand. Not ionic, technically speaking, if there weren't any technological devices that actually did that. Technically it's ionic, but it only switches out electrons. As the vibration goes through it, as your hand goes through it, because you have to realize your hand doesn't go through it. The vibration that you set out does. So, as you realize certain vibrations and realize that ions, or not ions, but ions, groups of ionic bonds can separate and completely and utterly, like, vibrate, I guess, you'll realize that it will look like ionic bonds are changing, like again, a bottle turning from water to ice that had been put into the refrigerator for too long. But not for too long. Realize that it's the specific vibration that's going through the entire bottle, and realizing its outside temperature, because that's the reason why when something has surface tension, which a bottle does, when it's moved, that surface tension is lost. And that's the reason why bottles freeze whenever they're in a certain temperature and you hit them. But as you start to realize there are people out there that that understand a certain specific type of what they would call alchemy, because it's not actually alchemy. Alchemy is just a saying of something that they don't know, so they're going to go back through. That they couldn't study or react or anything to anything that happened around them because of the vibration that went through them. That being their own fear of something going wrong. And that's the synapse that fires every single time that something happens and you don't know what's going to happen. Hence the reason for all of those dudes probably in old times being fucking shitting their pants all the time. Lewis and Clark probably shit their pants a lot because they saw a lot of different things that existed in a lot of different ways, and they tried to kill it because they're stupid. A lot of times I believed in something, and I believed in, like, a lot of different things. But, most of the time people wouldn't understand that, but understandably so, if they should understand it, if they try to understand it, if they study it and know it, then there's nothing that goes wrong. It's like the penny that I told this guy, I knew that this experiment would work. Yeah. I knew that this experiment would work that I did. Okay? Yeah, pretty much. I'm by myself. Most of the time when people make experiments, they don't realize sometimes what's in the groundwater. They don't realize what's in their certain elements because they don't see it. It's the reason why sometimes the people try to look through certain different radiation goggles or radiation glasses. That's not yellow or orange glasses. They're charged particles that are you're able to see those certain things sometimes. Charged particles that people see sometimes that are either moving, separating, or going somewhere. Charged particles keep their ionic bonds. That's the reason why when a bulb goes out, it pops. It doesn't always pop, but the cycle itself makes a sound, and that vibration makes a popping sound. It's not a sound from another dimension. Most of the times when I realized these certain facts, or knew these certain bonds were here, or knew that this certain kind of science or pseudoscience that these trees sometimes make, because trees are pseudoscience, and they still work. Or technically pseudoscience, because people used to not believe in them all the time. Or just not study anything about what they do, or actually how they get their things back, or their whatchamacallit, or their specific vibration. That's the reason why, and the reason why the lack of vibration is where trees stay sometimes. It's the reason why sometimes people don't realize that the more they move around in a certain area, the more wind there is. It's because of a certain ionic tendency. An ionic tendency, when you create a certain pattern or movement, that pattern of movement is repeated inside of not a vacuum, but a gravitational pull. It's because of the certain, what's the word? Vibrations that people make. And it's not have anything to do with the force or anything like that. It's explainable completely by science. Because of a specific measurement that everyone takes every single time they do something. Okay. Think about this. You move your hand. That moves the wind behind you. If you are able to feel the wind behind you, behind your hand that's moving, realize that that thing is set in motion behind you. If you hold your hand down completely, that wind keeps going. And as it's met with a cold or hot system, that wind also keeps going. And that's probably the science behind all those people who thought they were bending things with their minds in Avatar, The Last Airbender. And yes, I talk about conspiracy theories all the time because sometimes they're actually not connected, but they're associated with certain facts. Like, take Slenderman, for example. There is probably a lore in somewhere about someone who was lacking in size or stature. The same thing as Rumpelstiltskin, basically. The same thing as Rumpelstiltskin. The person who basically thought that they had gotten something, or a suggestion, basically, because people used to persecute the shit out of people who were different sometimes, and it sucked, and it was bad, and people need to understand that those people were not the things that they thought they were, and lore is stupid sometimes. Like, dwarves sometimes were not even dwarves. They were just not finished growing. You have to understand that if people understand that the Lord of the Rings, if it ever happened, then people would have been like 17 and 18. Frodo would have been about 10 or 11. The realization of fact is that people don't understand that that the reason why people get hair on the tops of their feet is to imitate wildlife so they don't mess with them. It's a natural thing because people's thoughts used to go towards, oh my god, there's going to be something here and I'm not going to be able to defend myself against it. And that's probably the reason why people have hair on the top of their feet now. Because they wanted all the brush to be able to get their scent so that animals would stay away. That is an actual evolutionary trait sometimes. And people don't understand it because, oh my god, I got hair on the top of my feet. What does that mean? You walked around barefoot a bunch and your feet thought, because you thought, because your feet did because you thought that it was going to somehow have a bunch of different worms and spiders because of something that your mom said or something like that about, oh my god, a spider. And you thought that, oh my god, I know what spiders are because I've seen them before. How many spiders? So realize that's the reason why people grow hair sometimes. And usually if you center yourself and you can stop doing that, but there's something that needs to realize. You need to realize is that there is danger out there and you need to be calm about it. There is danger everywhere. And you need to have faith and realize in your skills and in yourself, you studied a lot. And I've studied a lot. The realization of fact that some people don't realize that that I can pull this stuff from memory pretty easily. And there were just certain parts of my brain that were remaining dormant sometimes. And I think that's the reason why I developed schizoaffective disorder. Because I was using my frontal lobe a lot, and I think that there was a lot of reasons why that happened. And after me taking drugs, I think, it really didn't affect me that much. Because drugs don't make you get schizoaffective disorder. They just make you die if you take too much of them. And also get sick if you ever feel like trying to do something stupid. Like, say, a terroristic plot, or trying to do something stupid. Like Jackass. That entire show was terrible. I appreciated it while it was there, but then I realized something, and then I didn't like it anymore. Didn't just realize something, though. I realized that all that stuff is just them doing stupid shit. And saying stupid shit on TV because they know they're not that way. And also to realize that animals become mad when they stay the same. When animals get the same, or they don't change for some reason, they get angry and vengeful against people. They get angry and vengeful against people. So PETA's whole prospect, their whole realization of thought, over if it was just a reflex or not, or if it was just them trying to be alone. And no, it was never just them trying to be alone. They never want to be alone. They always want to be careful and be with their pack, or be with whatever the thing is called that they're with. And I'm gonna go run from a tank. Shit! Didn't work. It's a good thing my bike didn't. Wait, hold on. It did explode. There were a lot of times where I believed in certain things that were fictional because I knew there was some sort of fact in it. I believed it, and I knew it. I knew there was some sort of fact actually hiding behind all that stuff, all that nature, all that stuff that they were thinking about. The realization of fact is that people don't understand that people don't understand that they're not the way that they think they are. It's like how Deadpool, you saw him in the first one, as he changed over time, it's only because of himself centering himself and feeling comfortable, eventually, probably. He's going to say that, and he's going to be wrong. The lore behind it is that there was a doctor, okay? That doctor was Doctor Strange. After Thanos had tricked Deadpool into believing that he was going to be his friend and tried to kill him, and didn't realize that he was living forever because he just kept on getting himself back together. Doctor Strange used a bunch of incantations to be able to fix his skin. It's in the comics. If they omitted it, then they're stupid, because it would tie every single little piece together about what's happening in the universe right now. Not to say that I read anything, but I might have seen some limited edition comics. Hopefully they realize that story is a thing. Because I realized that is an absolute eventuality. Because of the lack of idiocy in the MCU. Understandably so, that's probably what they are going to use, but I don't know. And they're probably going to say something different, like, no, I just ate my vegetables, or something. Like a dumbass. He cut out the gluten, that's what he did. He cut out all the gluten. I don't think Vanessa liked Doctor Strange for any reason. Also realize that there are a lot of people out there that really do enjoy having a good time. There are a lot of times where I believed that people really needed to understand that they needed to, like, what's the word? They need to just calm down and center themselves, because sometimes they can give themselves different, what's the word? Warts or things sometimes. And when you're realizing something for the first time, if you're interacting with anything, then you'll associate that thing with that same thing all the time, because your brain itself likes to do things less all the time, because it wants to take in more information and know different things about the world that's completely and utterly around us. I know for a fact that I knew some of these things, that I studied some of these things, and that I came to those realizations. The realization of fact is that I think that there are a lot of people out there that can do some very, very amazing things, given some certain reflexes, and but understandably so, they need to understand that those things aren't going to come for them if they are not centered or well adjusted in their situation, because that's the reason why I think that older dudes tried to realize their own, tried to be like, I'm trying to be calm, guys, and yelling is not calm, because that's what you gotta do. You gotta start over, because your heart rate goes up and your pulse goes up and all those other different things. The reason why when I walk to see my doctor, I sometimes get sweaty, and that's what happens. So, realize a certain fact of choice. Realize that there are people out there that really do deserve a lot of different praise and a lot of different awesomeness for being amazing and utter awesomeness. But understanding that people themselves don't make a society who do awesome things, because awesome things are sometimes bad things. Because it's an opinion. Being awesome is an opinion. It's an opinionated statement. Doesn't mean that someone's completely amazing or completely great at their job. It just means that they're awesome. It means that they did something, they thought it was cool. That person who was witnessing thought it was cool, and then they didn't learn anything else because they don't want to learn themselves. They want to learn through interactions. That's the reason why they're stupid, because they don't understand that a lot of times you use specific vibrations to be able to feel calm. Like, that's the reason why I think people didn't understand what infrasound is actually. And they don't understand that it was the low hum of a certain thing. The low hum of a certain thing that people can actually hear once they concentrate enough. Certain people, specific people that have been literally studying for ages and generations. Like Shaolin monks, or even those nuns out there. They know how to use emotions against people. They know how to just say something completely snappy, or say something completely done with, and then they realize that they've changed someone, completely changed someone, from stopping them from ever doing something stupid that they might have realized before, or ever seen before, or ever noticed before. There are a lot of times where I believed in people who took the wrong path. But as I started to realize that life goes on, I started to realize that there were people out there that really do have amazing qualities about them. But also I realized that the more I tried to feel comfortable in situations, sometimes my friends wouldn't give me that comfort, I guess. Not give me that comfort, but... And I don't want to say they're bad or anything like that, because they're not bad. They're cool. They're really awesome. It's just, I feel introverted sometimes, and I feel like I have to get away. It's not something that I'm doing. It's not something that I'm saying. It's not something that's going to happen or anything like that. It's just something that I've realized that people are good at. And I get taken aback sometimes. Like, wow, I never even saw that. That was amazing. And yes, it is amazing, because there are a lot of people out there that really do some amazing things. And sometimes they never notice certain things about themselves because they're not connected to the certain vibration that something makes, or able to pick out a certain animal's vibration, or the creaking of the steps that happen whenever something comes up to your house. Being able to hear that and being able to notice that is a supreme and utter talent. And there are people looking for obvious people who know how to pick out specific vibrations that animals make without making sound. There are really, really talented people out there, and if they learned and got themselves completely and utterly out of what they're doing, because sometimes they do stupid shit and they don't realize it because they're just eating couch material and something like that. Or eating way too much fast food. Or understanding that certain things don't give them vitamins, but if they eat it for long enough, it will. And if it does give them vitamins, then it'll release stuff. Because that's the reason why ionic bonds are so important. And that's the reason why silence is so deftly important. Because the realization of fact is that as a chemical reaction happens, and it gets silent, the vibration of something can stop, and it can stop a chemical reaction or an ionic bond from happening. There are a lot of people that have been able to not hold a chemical reaction, but realize a chemical reaction and not realize that it became a part of their entire psyche. Because they worked with that chemical for so much, and sometimes they didn't use gloves. That's what happens with ionic bonds. They flow through the air when something is charged. Like, say, when a light is near something. It's the reason why those people who are working in those dresses, even if they're not working with poisonous chemicals, they're still trying to have a mask on all the time. Goggles and an entire set of gloves with stuff that covers their wrists. But also the realization of fact is that eventually they don't realize that what they're making isn't airtight. No matter if they're selling drugs or doing something terrible or realizing something stupid or just not realizing that they didn't close that freaking pack of goddamn hot dogs correctly. And I had hot dogs, and then someone didn't close them correctly. That's what happens when things get that way, because they get freezer burnt. They always get freezer burnt because the freezer's right underneath it. It's right real close to it. It's the reason why everything tastes so fresh and so crisp sometimes. It's because it's freezer burnt. Or freezer frosted, I guess what you want to call it. Technically, it's already happened, because that's the reason why it happens. They put it in a freezer sometimes, and then they thaw it out whenever they bring it to whatever place they're bringing it to. Or they haul dry ice with it at the same time, and it can cause freezer burnness immediately. Especially if it gets connected, if it gets connected to certain things, if it gets connected to, what's the word, not connected. If it gets connected, if it gets underneath some sort of box, and that box becomes wet, because that's what dry ice does. It separates and immediately freezes afterwards. And it's the reason for dry ice. That's what happens. It's the reason why when you put it down on something, it'll start literally moving, because it's dry, but it's ice. And ice melts. So when dry ice melts, it freezes again. And that's how snow happens in spring. Also the planet Earth, and also a whole bunch of different stuff that I'm not mentioning because I don't want to be labeled a terrorist by any walkthrough. I don't want to get in trouble. So that's what I'm doing. So understanding the facts of the matter, that as you understand certain things and realize certain elements are around you, smoking weed very often can kind of build up a smoke receptor in your mind, in your brain. And also it can run through different emotions whenever, like a synapse firing as you're smoking a cigarette. And you don't realize that sometimes it doesn't calm you down. Sometimes it absolutely speeds you up. So understanding that there are people out there that don't understand that certain motions happen for a reason. That wind behind your hand didn't exactly cause the storm, but it's the fact that the high pressure and the low pressure, the hot and the cold, or the hot and the not so hot, because low pressure and high pressure are basically gauges of words, because it can happen in any way sometimes, especially if there are the elements or the minerals that are inside of the hot and cold depression, because that's what happens basically. The sand itself in a desert or anywhere, that's the reason why the salt comes out. The salt pulls to the top, because it believes that it's being pulled to the top to be able to get deer, or to, it doesn't believe that, but that's what its ionic bond produces, because of specific sciences that have actually been procured. And that's the reason why the Earth does that, because it mimics that process. It mimics that process of salt things. And it's also the reason why you shouldn't lick it, because it's not the same kind of salt. Animals can eat it because they've been eating it for centuries, and their generations, through breeding and different things like that, they've been able to completely and utterly hold themselves up with literally no water sometimes. That's the reason why you'll see an animal dry as hell, completely looking dry, like it's completely dry, but it's still walking around. It's not a zombie. It's a deer. But realize, as all of those different ionic bonds, or as you start to realize that you're outside of your own body sometimes, or if you start to realize that certain things around you can see, realize that you shouldn't use that often, because you don't want your eyes to revert back, because that's sometimes what makes people it's like, don't do that often. Don't do it often. Do not do it often. Because that's what happens, okay? You get eyes on the back of your head. You can't evolve like that. It sucks. Don't do it. You'll constantly be dry because the back of your head is not meant to happen like that. Also, too, realizing that I've never done that before. And never will. I've also realized that there are different things that people understand through different types of pressures. There are a lot of times where people understand certain different chemicals that mix together, and they decide to get certain things from certain places, and realizing a simple fact of the matter is that sometimes people don't understand the full spectrum of different things that actually exist around us and are always existing around us, especially particles that can be set on fire, because that's the reason why talcum powder is flammable. It's not the talcum powder that's flammable, because if it's mixed with water, then it's not flammable. Hence your sweat, all those other different things. It's the particles in the air sometimes that move around that you know are flammable. And that's the reason why you can light that stuff on fire if there's a high intensity of oxygen somewhere. It's the reason why it doesn't work sometimes. It's the reason why your lighter sometimes doesn't light. It's because in New Orleans, pretty much everything is flame retardant right now. So when you're out there doing stuff, just realize, people knew. The reason why they said it was below sea level is because they wanted to let people know that they had a drainage system. It's not actually below sea level. Come here and find out. It's pretty dry, but it's not that dry. Not as dry as California. And that's also the reason why people get darker sometimes. But they don't realize they're not changing race, or they're not changing skins or anything like that. They're just gaining different attributes because of the thing that they want to look like. A lot of times, if people center themselves or are able to change those different things about themselves, because there are people that can do it, people who have trained for centuries, not centuries, but generations, and pass their knowledge down to their kids. Understandably so. Sometimes they just wanted to be good. Other times they were really good, and then people assumed them to be bad. So there were a lot of times where people don't understand that sometimes people want to look a certain way, and that's the reason why they're staying there. Sometimes people want to look and be a certain way because they don't understand that there are a lot of different reasons why people really let go of themselves sometimes and have no idea that they're not that way. And also, I only give people so many chances sometimes in my life. I know that for a fact, and if I had more money, or if I was able to do something about it, I would do something about it. But I don't, and I won't probably. So and just realize I don't. The only reason why I smile or even got in the situation of notion, because I used to scare my dad all the time with my smile. I used to scare my dad all the time. He used to get scared sometimes, and but he got pretty used to it sometimes, and he always comes back at me sometimes. It's because of what we used to do sometimes. We used to play games and a lot of different stuff, and I just wanted my dad to experience stuff like that because it would help his hands. Because a lot of times when people have figurative friggin' things, they can diagnose themselves with tons of friggin' diseases because of they having a certain symptom. Because of some people are practicing hypochondriacs, and that's it. They're just practicing hypochondriacs. They're just ready for the end of the world, and it sucks. And sometimes they went through a lot of bullshit because, and also sometimes they got really really hurt. And but also realize that there are people out there that care, and there are people out there that don't care, but care enough. And care enough to tell you that if you process your dirt, then you'll be able to use a lot more different stuff. And if you try to process all of it, then you're probably never going to get there in time. But understandably so, the earth does it by itself, because there are roots growing underneath that place, and I know it. There are a lot of roots, and those things are fresh. Do not try to dig in there, because they will try to immediately go to the sun, and they're waiting. So just don't dig down a lot. Realize that there's trees out there, and if you try to make them used to certain things, and if you try to do things stupid, hold on one second. Terrorists. 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 I had to go back there and realize that there were terrorists in my closet. No, I'm just playing. They're not. It's funny. There's nothing in my closet, so it's funny. The realization of fact, though, is that sometimes people don't realize that, I would love to LARP. It would be really cool. But but it probably wouldn't help, because I probably have to go with people that are that I study the stuff that I study, I guess, or not study the stuff that I study, but I'd have to go with that sort of guild, I guess. I guess that would be really cool. But I just want to say that there's a lot of different things out there that people don't understand, and if they stop fighting, then it'll make it come that much quicker. And it'll calm them down. I think it will calm them down and make them realize that help's coming soon, and it's coming from below, and it is going to be there, and it is going to be amazing. So realize, whenever you're out there trying to realize certain things or trying to be a certain person, realize that that's what the wind is doing sometimes. It's taking off the topsoil and moving it into different places. And sometimes people need to do that the same, to realize that the earth sometimes can't carry all that stuff, because there's just not enough power. So realize, if you sell your dirt, oh my god, dude. Oh my god, because it's not sand. None of it's sand. It's the reason why you can go down it on a snowboard and stuff like that and still be able to not get anything in your eyes, even though you're freaking... It's the reason why those dudes have those bushy eyebrows and bushy eyelashes, because it's a natural response from when they were young. Because you used to get dirt in their eyes, and their eyelashes used to grow a lot. I know I wouldn't fare well there, but understandably so. They'll probably hopefully stop fighting, I guess, because I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's about to happen, and I know it is, because I can literally feel the pressure here, and I know it's the same there. Because I know where the storm came from. I know exactly where the storm came from. Exactly. I'm yawning, but Realization of fact is that people need to understand that there are people out there that are stupid. No matter what, they wanted more information. Realize that they can't have that because I don't know anymore. That's all I pretty much studied to be able to make sure that I could connect all of these thoughts together. It's not all I studied, but shut up. I'm by myself. I don't have Tourette's. It's funny. It's a joke to me. But understandably so, realize that the more you try to push things, the more you try to push your voice on people or something like that, the more you'll realize that your voice will literally make you shut up. It will make you stop talking. You'll stop talking and realize that your verbal voice was pushing out certain different things, and you didn't realize that people themselves were just pumping oxygen into it. Just realize that. That in casinos, they pump oxygen into it because they want people to sit down and they want people to think about the problem at hand. Sometimes oxygen is good. That's the reason why you can't smoke in there, because if they did, then they would not all fucking die, because the oxygen isn't that flammable. It's a slow-moving chemical sometimes. It's oxygen. It's considered a chemical because of its ionic bonds. So, yay, there we go. I got it out. And I'm ready to take on the world. Amazing. I'm so my room's still not clean. Damn it. Have a good day. And realize you are your own one-man metaphorical bomb squad. And I have 4 left. Let's do something fun. That's a safe distance. Right here. Safe distance. Safe distance. Safe distance. Alright, let's see if we can live. And we're probably not going to. But I'm going to stand exactly right here with Trevor and not myself. We're going to see if we don't die. There we go, see? Because that's the reason why. Those are fireworks. Those emulate fireworks. It's the reason why. If there was actually a brick of C4 that ever had any buttons, run. If there was ever a brick of C4 on anything that you ever saw, run. Because that means that something is about to get picked up, and realize the fact that it could have hurt a lot of people. Realize that. Realize exactly that. Could have hurt a lot of people. But understandably so, that's a specific situation that I'm never going to talk about, because YouTube! Woo! I win again!